Hello, everyone. My name is Billy Jones, and I am a proud member of the South Florida Writers Association. Welcome to our November 2020 Virtual Author Showcase, a virtual experience. This showcase celebrates our aspiring writers and active members and their creative crafts. Please learn more about our organization by visiting southfloridawriters.org to learn more about our latest programs, our upcoming conferences, and of course, our authors. This month's author is one of our proud members. She is a board member and also a very active member of our association. Adele Royce was raised in Los Angeles and graduated magna cum laude from Arizona State University with a Bachelor's of Arts in English Literature. She survived the insanity of the Las Vegas Strip, where she worked for many years as an advertising and public relations executive. Ms. Royce's personal experience with the industry's creativity and chaos gave her inspiration for her multiple book series entitled Truth, Lies, and Love in Advertising. She lives with her husband in South Florida, where she is active in the writing community. Her short stories have won numerous first place awards. It is with great pleasure that I introduce my dear colleague, Adele Royce. Welcome, Adele.
Thank you, Billy. And I just wanted to double up on what you said. And I want to thank you, Dr. Billy Jones, as well as the South Florida Writers Association and Books and Books for continuing to keep this author showcase alive in a virtual format. I'm very honored to be a part of it. So without further ado, I'd like to show you a little presentation that I have prepared for us to take you through. So my pen name is Adele Royce. A lot of people ask me why I use pen name, and really because I'm a marketer by trade, I look at it as a brand, really. And Adele is actually my middle name. My first name's Madeline, and Royce is my husband's middle name, and he is so much a part of my writing. We are sort of writing partners. I do the writing, and he helps me. He reads everything I write before anyone else does. And so that's where I got Adele Royce. It's actually the middle part of my name, Adele, and one of my very clever colleagues pointed out that Adele, the writer, lives within Madeline. But if you take Adele out of Madeline, what is left is mine. So I thought that was pretty cool. So, as Billy said, Truth, Lies, and Love in Advertising is the series, and the genre is romance. But I don't like to limit it to that because there's a lot of crossover into romantic comedy, into women's fiction. I think it appeals mostly to women, but I have had men enjoy it, even if they don't want to admit that. But I was inspired to write this series of books because I'll be honest, I missed shows like Sex and the City. I am a big fan of the show Mad Men. So I'd say those two shows are kind of a combination of what I have. I like the female relationships, I like the career drama, I like fashion, and then of course there's the advertising. Why do I write about advertising? It's definitely what I know, and I've worked on both the client side and on the agency side, so I understand what goes on in that world, and I think a lot of people get a kick out of, especially having worked in the industry, out of what goes on. And of course everything in these books is fiction, but there's so much that you can show that is both the glamorous part of the industry and the very unglamorous part. So I have 3 books: Camera Ready, For Position Only, and Princess Smile. Camera Ready is the book we're going to talk about today. For Position Only is the sequel to this book, which will be out in December, and Princess Smile is the prequel to this book, which will be out in early summer of 2021. So here's the book, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my writing process. I'm going to tell you what the book's about, first of all, because I have an elevator pitch that I should have memorized by now, but it is basically, it's set in Los Angeles. Camera Ready offers a compelling version of a love triangle at its center. A young advertising executive's secure world topples over when a dangerous old flame re-enters her life. So that's what this book is about. My writing process, I write in first person. And author Neil Gaiman made a comment of that, and I'm going to paraphrase him, because he said, basically, when you write in first person, the protagonist who's narrating takes you by the hand and pulls you through, and the author's voice essentially goes away. So really, you become that character when you're writing. I know a lot of authors outline heavily when they write. I don't do that. I'm what you'd probably consider a pantser, meaning I write by the seat of my pants, but I always know at least the plot premises, and I know what's going to happen at the end. And whatever happens in between there is really, really up for grabs. And I want to mention one experience, because I know a lot of writers have this, and it's so incredibly magical. When you are writing a scene and suddenly the character goes off and does something that you had absolutely no intention of them doing. And you're literally, thank goodness I took typing in junior high, because following them as fast as I can with my typing fingers. People who have read my books will say, they'll be in the middle of it and say, I'm so worried about Jane, or I'm so worried about, aren't you worried about them? And I say, yes. And sometimes I will write a particularly intense scene and I'll go to bed and I'll toss and turn all night worried about them. So yes, I do worry about them, but as another of my colleagues brought up, they'll be okay. They have friends in high places. So that's kind of my writing process. And I created a mood board. I love to create a mood board because it visualizes, it gives me a visual so I can write from. I cast A-list celebrities because I don't have a budget in my movie. I can cast whoever I want. I can cast 20 A celebrities. I can shoot wherever I want on any location because I have no budget and it doesn't matter. So I tend to put together these mood boards sort of as an homage to the days of advertising where I actually put together mood boards and presented ad concepts to clients. But literally what they do is show me who the people are and who the characters are, and it helps me develop them and have a visual of what they're doing, where they live, where they work, all of those gritty things. So I want to spend a little time on Jane, and because I do believe my books are character driven, and Jane Mercer is my protagonist. And what I do when I develop a character, which is not unique, is I write a full bio on all of them because I need to know their backstory, because I need to understand what they want in order to write the book. If you don't know what your character wants, then you don't really know how they're going to react in situations, what decisions they'll make, whether it's good or bad, how they're feeling when somebody says something or does something. So it's really important to know their backstory. And so when I created Jane, I wanted her to have a bit of a sad upbringing. She's 28 in this novel. She's a vice president of accounts at the fictitious ad agency Warren Mitchell and Partners. And she's very successful, but she had a sort of a sad childhood. She was abandoned by her mother when she was born. Her father abandoned her when she was 8, and she was forced to live with her very well-intended grandparents, Bruce and Barbara Mercer, who are so funny without intending to be. I often pull characters in for comic relief when things get a little too serious or intense. But they are very old-fashioned, and Jane kind of grew up a little bit lonely, and she didn't have siblings, and so she really, really relies on her support system as an adult and sort of is learning lessons that maybe she could have learned if she had had the type of parents or the type of nurturing that that she needed in order to be able to go out in the world and have that self-confidence. And I point this out because it'll show how she clashes with her live-in boyfriend, who's played by Robert Pattinson, Derek Lowell. He's on the contrast, he grew up with an agonizingly normal family, and he had all the love and caring, and he's a classical violinist, and he plays for the LA Philharmonic, and they are living together at the onset of this novel, soon to be engaged. And I want to point out, and I'm going to use something that Margaret Atwood said when I think she was talking about Handmaid's Tale, and she was talking about female characters, and how that if we wrote female characters the way they need to behave in society, that they would be very boring. And so women misbehaving are so much more interesting. And so when I wrote Jane, I wanted her to misbehave and I wanted her to be flawed. And she absolutely is flawed and she makes mistakes. And so we will move into the book. It starts in Tongva Park, which is in Santa Monica. This is an actual park. I've been there many times. I walked through it so that I could write the first page of the book. And I want to give you a little idea of Jane's personality because I set this up specifically to show the reader. Tongva Park was not exactly a Norman Rockwell painting. After dusk, it was more like something from Francisco de Goya's Black Period. It was not the safest path, but it was the quickest. And there was something exhilarating about the element of danger, the chance that I might not make it to the other side. A chilly breeze whistled through the rusty fig trees as I made my way through Main Street in downtown Santa Monica. The bars and restaurants were humming with chatter, the bar-hopping locals getting started for the evening. As I closed in on the park entrance, I felt my heart pulsating as I whipped my way towards Ocean Avenue. I shivered, my stilettos clacking against the cement with a compulsive rhythm. Now I'm going to skip forward just to page 2, and I'm going to read you another quick passage. This also is revealing. I lowered my head and emerged onto the brightly lit Ocean Avenue, giggling triumphantly as the last vestiges of a spectacular sunset shimmered before me. I stopped walking long enough to absorb the orange-pink rays stabbing through fluffy cloud formations hovering at the base of the restless ocean. The sunset was my promise of hope, of love, romance, and all its trappings. I wish sunsets were never ending so I could immerse myself for hours just to feel the residual sense of peace. So right away, we know what Jane wants. Jane wants stability. She wants to get married. She may want to have kids. She wants a house, maybe with a picket fence, maybe without. But she also has a tendency to risky behavior and a little bit of drama, which is her flaw. Okay, this is definitely her conflict. Craig Axel Keller, the ultimate villain, and I named him Axel Keller because I just love that name. However, his nickname is the Axe in town, and you'll find out. I'm not going to tell you why, but this character is incredibly insidious, and he evokes such an emotional response from both my female and my male readers. You will love to hate this man. Now, I drew him to be 6'5" and to look like Armie Hammer, light eyes, dark hair, perfect teeth, broad shoulders, immaculately dressed, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't know Armie Hammer was going to be my casting until I saw him in a movie like several years after I had already had this image in my mind of who Craig was. Now, Jane has a history with Craig, and it's not a good one. She had a fling with him in a previous life, and he treated her terribly. But there are some mixed emotions there. He is the managing partner of the competing rival ad agency of Warren Mitchell and Partners, where Jane works, and he is the top guy in town. He's wealthy, he's powerful, he is charming, witty, smart, he collects Chagall paintings. He's irresistible. I wanted to make him that way so that it would be easy to believe that Jane would have a hard time resisting him. And I like to look at Craig as this amazing cake that is decorated so beautifully and with this amazing icing, and from an aesthetics standpoint, so perfect. But when you cut into it, you get something very different, something rotten. I'm just going to read a passage about how Jane feels about Craig because she runs right into him in chapter 1, and it starts off the chain reaction. With the memory of Craig Keller came the terrible zigzagging of emotions, the obsession, secrecy, rage, and desire. He was the sorcerer of all things romantic until he turned vicious and brutal. He gave and withdrew affection as it suited him, quickly whipping me into a pile of emotional debris, one I had to unearth to find myself again. What I told Marissa was true. I hated him, but in a strange and awful way, I loved him too. So therein lies the conflict. Jane has a couple of best friends. They are her sisters because she doesn't have siblings, as I talked about her childhood. They give her a lot of advice. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. These two are flawed too, but they really do love Jane and she needs them. They're very strong women. I painted them both that way in different ways. And I cast Kat Blakely at Santa Miller as her because I envisioned this beautiful tall blonde woman. And so these are her friends. These are her colleagues, actually, Jane's colleagues at the agency of Warren Mitchell and Partners. Of course, I've cast Hugh Jackman. Again, I have no budget, so I can afford Hugh Jackman to be Jane's boss. And Warren is this great boss. He runs the ad agency that's in Santa Monica. He is wholly focused on the job. He's very supportive of his employees. He loves Jane. He supports everybody. He doesn't like drama. He wants them to do their jobs and go home at night. But what does Warren want? Warren is really focused on getting his company to become public because he is losing clients to his rival, Craig Keller. And one of the things that we will find out in the backstory is that Craig was his protege at one point, and Craig repaid him for his mentorship by stealing all of his clients and his executives years ago. So Warren has an axe to grind, and he is wholly focused on getting this company public so he can compete in the same arena with Craig Keller and his agency. Jeffrey, played by John Krasinski, Jeffrey Vance is a partner. He used to be the creative director, but he is also Jane's work husband. He has her back. He protects her. He swaps company secrets with her. He never squeals on her. He covers for her. They cover for each other. And I always look at office relationships like family relationships. If you've had a career, you know what I'm talking about. Warren is the father figure that Jane never had, and Jeffrey is the big brother that she never had. This is where they work. I picked, ad agencies, if you don't know, are usually pretty cool. I picked this for the agency in Santa Monica with Warren because it was a little casual, but yet, there's some Ames era pieces in there that are fun. And it's a little bit more casual. And I did this so that I could contrast where she has to go work shortly. In every book, there's an inciting incident. And we just talked about Warren and how he's so focused on bringing his company public that he has a ticket to this gala. And he's so busy with the IPO that he has to send somebody, and Jeffrey would be next in line, but he's just as busy. So he gives his single ticket to Jane to attend this event, which is a charity event. And of course, coincidentally, Jane has a ticket and she has to sit next to guess who all evening. So without telling you what happens, there's a lot of champagne being poured. Jane's glass is never empty. Of course, Craig is his witty and most charming self, and some mistakes are made. These are just some of the things that become icons in the story because I believe fashion in my books they are in themselves characters, and some of the things that Craig has. He has a black Bentley that keeps recurring. He always drives a convertible black Bentley. I don't know why I picked that. It just seemed like him. He lives in Brentwood in this particular story, and he has this apartment that is, of course, he has the whole floor, and he has an infinity pool, and that's where he lives. And of course, I dress him in this impeccable way that, I just picture him being dressed in as fashionable as Jane is, and Jane is extremely fashionable. Again, fashion plays a big role in here. So if you've been to a silent auction or a charity event, they usually have a bunch of things that are expensive, that are, laid out, sports memorabilia, this, that. Jane, before she knows that Craig is at the gala, she sees this bag and she wants it, and he sees her with it, loitering around it too long, and of course he buys it for her. The mistake is that Jane accepts it, and keep in mind she's now engaged to Derek and still living with him. This is just fun because I love this dress, and again, the fashion, I I saw Savannah Guthrie wearing this dress on Today's Show, and I was obsessing over it. I looked it up. It was like super expensive, and I thought, well, I could never afford that dress, but I'm going to dress one of my characters in it. So Kat, I think in chapter 3, is wearing this dress. Okay, so, and I'm not telling anything that's not on the back cover of the book because I don't want to ruin it for anybody who has not read this book. But basically, Craig has swooped in and he has found out that Warren's agency was trying to go public. He gives them a premium on the shares, buys it out, and so now Jane and all her colleagues and her buddies and Jeffrey and everybody have to go work for Craig, who has this incredibly lavish office in downtown Los Angeles, and he is a national agency, as I've mentioned. And these are I have this office here, the lobby. I'm actually going to read a little passage because it'll describe both him and his office. So this is Jane talking about her first day on the job at Keller Whitman Group. She's now forced to work there. Upon arrival, I immediately surveyed the lobby. It was excruciatingly modern and slightly different from what I remembered a few years back. Craig must have had the decor updated. I remembered the hard white leather couches and multicolored throw pillows. I recalled the first time I went to meet Craig, waiting on those leather couches, apprehensive and fidgety because I had no idea what I was getting myself into and still didn't. I also recognized the tall glass vases filled with fresh white calla lilies on every surface and some larger vases on the floor. The whole place felt decadent, yet stiffly controlled. And if that isn't a comment about Craig's personality, I don't know what is. Of course, I had to add some new characters in when Jane goes to work in this new environment. Hayden Town is Jane's adversary, and doesn't she look like that? I just found this picture of this model because I thought she was the perfect person to be Hayden Town, and I drew the character based on this one photo. She's Jane's adversary because she's being pitted against Jane. The two of them are competing for the same position, and it's not pretty. Now, Alonso Costa is the creative director, and I've cast Jason Schwartzman as him just because he plays all these quirky roles. He works a lot with Wes Anderson, and I can just picture him as Alonso. And if you don't know, creative director in an agency is a person, it's the brains behind all of the advertising, all of the concepts, the colors, the messages, the copy, it's all done. And this guy has it kind of, he's got his finger on the pulse of all of that. I'm going to read a description. This is Jane, and I want you to picture Jason Schwartzman dressed differently. The other person I had a hard time getting used to was the creative director, an odd temperamental artist who is unbending when it came to his work. When we met, I immediately recalled Warren's comment that he was an infamous prima donna. His name was Alonso Costa, and he dressed like a teenage rapper with baggy pants, black hoodies, sweatshirts, and a baseball cap worn backwards. He was Latino with long, straight black hair past the middle of his back. His sideburns were dyed a peacock blue. He was unnaturally thin, and his veins protruded from his arms like a wiry labyrinth of cords underneath a coating of thin tattooed latex. He had obviously not read the employee handbook's policy regarding tattoos. I suspected Craig gave direct orders as to who would be given preferential treatment, obvious double standards. He must have a list of who the agency would tolerate violating policies. The superstars could get away with anything they wanted. So that is those folks. This guy, okay, I cast Simon Baker as Craig's partner, who used to be his frat buddy at Stanford. And, you know, he started the agency with him. Ben Whitman I'm going to read a quick thing just to describe him. This is the first time Jane has to present in front of both Craig and Ben in the new environment. And she says, no matter what I thought about Craig personally, professionally, he was always so polished and buttoned up. Ben had effectively checked out, looking up blankly while staring at his phone intermittently like he barely knew which client he was meeting and didn't really care either. I realized then that Ben was useless to Craig. Other than as an attractive ornament, there to agree with everything Craig said, rather than to express an opinion of his own merit. He was the proverbial dumb blonde, and I had so much fun calling a man a dumb blonde. Sorry. And then this is one of my favorite characters, played by Bette Midler, of course, because there's no budget. Media planner Bobby Silverstein. She becomes Jane's ally, and I'm just going to read a quick passage about her. There was one, and she's also somebody I bring in as comic relief because she's hilarious. There is one woman, however, who did not fit into the prototypical Keller mold. Her name was Bobby Silverstein, and she ran the media department. I knew of her long before joining Keller Whitman Group because her reputation in the industry was legendary. A short, crusty woman in her mid-60s, Bobby was the only woman in a protected class within the entire organization. Her nickname was the Silver Dollar, referring to both her long silvery hair as well as her reputation for nailing media rates for clients that were well below what every other agency was paying. Jeffrey told me Craig went after her as soon as his agency was established and paid her a handsome sum to leave her previous job with Ogilvy in New York. And if you know anything about advertising, Ogilvy is the tip-top one in the country and sometimes in the world. So there you go. And I am going to turn it back over to Dr. Billy Jones. Thank you very much for listening.
And thank you so much, Adele. That was amazing. And also, thank you to our listeners and our viewers for attending our November 2020 virtual showcase. Please tune in for more showcases to come in the subsequent months by visiting southfloridawriters.org. And to follow Adele Royce, please visit Adele Royce at adeleroyce.com or any of the social media links that are provided below. Until our next month, thank you and take care.